Hi, I'm Dave, and this is Nights and Weekends, where the conversation is aimed at the non-professionals out there who have a day job and also fill their nights and their weekends with work that involves cameras, lights, audio gear, and all kinds of related equipment. I spell nights with a K because you men and women who are out there burning the candle at both ends really are the brave heroes of the industry. And also because nights with an N was already kind of a thing. So there's that. The subject today is Nikon's new Z-mount 105mm f2.8 macro S lens. I got it the day it was released thanks to my pre-order with B&H. And I've had it out and about for enough testing and practical use to have an opinion. Spoiler alert, I love this lens. I do a lot of product photography, so a macro lens in the arsenal is essential. I already have the F-mount 60mm macro, so I opted for the 105 in the Z-mount. The benefits of the longer focal length include the ability to stay a little further from your work, not block your own light, and still get the magnification you need. Nikon's been knocking them out of the park recently with all these new Z-mount lenses, and I do hope to bring you reviews on many of the other new Z-mount lenses in the very near future. I chose to start with the 105 macro because it's not as obvious to a lot of people, but it's no niche lens. The quality for stills of macro and non-macro work may be evident, but I'm just as excited about the video uses for this lens. Because it's a Z lens, it's native to the new mirrorless Z cameras from Nikon, the Z6 II and the Z7 II, as well as the previous Z6 and Z7. All the stills and videos in this review were shot with this new 105 mounted on the Z6 II. The early bird may get the worm, but the early rising photographer can catch the bees out at first light, gathering their daily pollen. Even ants have to come along and forage for breakfast, it seems. And if you're lucky, you can see the bees primping. You must have a hot date later. Not all the small creatures that move about early in the day are as cute as the bee, but they all have their work to do. Regardless of cute versus creepy, the Nikon 105mm f2.8 macro is phenomenal at capturing them. No matter what you're filming, this awesome S lens brings it beautifully and naturally to life. Okay, here are some comparisons of photos taken with this lens, the 105 macro, and I'll actually do some side-by-side comparisons first. So I'm going to start with this chart, standard chart, and you can see this is like fully zoomed in. So if I zoom out now, you can see that the first thing I notice when I look at these two is there's a little bit more contrast with the lens wide open at f3, and it's only allowed to be wide open at f3 because of the focal length at this point. And then at f22, you start to lose a little contrast and a little bit of saturation, I think. But what you notice too is when you zoom in, you can see it's a little softer when you get out to f22. You start losing a little bit of that detail. And if we go all the way to the corner, what I want to show here is that it's pretty consistent all the way around the image, edge to edge and corner to corner. So at f22, you're losing some detail, but you're not losing any more detail really at the corners than you do in the middle, which is good. That consistency is very good. But when you look at the wide open shot, you can see that the detail is fantastic. Even though I took care to make sure the lens was parallel to the card, there's still a chance, those cards are printed on relatively thin stock, and they can have a little bit of wave to them, and that can make a difference. So I did this test with a steel ruler that is very likely not to be bending or waving. And if we look at those two, this is an even bigger extreme. So on the left, the lens was wide open at full macro. So this is the closest focusing distance, and it was wide open at 4.2. And then on the right, I just went completely insane, and I stopped it all the way down to f51. And you can see that this is like the biggest spread you can have. Both of those images look pretty good. They also look very similar. You can still see a little bit more contrast and definition, and if I zoom in and compare them, you can see that you definitely have more detail and definition when you're open than you do when you're stopped way down. But f51, that is insane. I mean, the depth of field would be incredible, especially if you weren't shooting macro. And it's still producing good quality stuff. So that's pretty impressive. But if you look at just the wide open shots here on the left, that is very, very impressive detail. All right, then, so those were sort of controlled tests. Now let's go to stuff I shot in the field and look at a couple of these in an extreme comparison. So over on the left, I'm wide open. Again, because of focal distance, I'm wide open at 3.2. And then I'm at f22 in the photo on the right. And from this vantage point, there's not a great deal of difference. You can really see that, you see the little nub of the chimney is much softer, obviously, with the lens wide open. So you can see that the definition doesn't fall off at f22, as we would expect. But even wide open at this distance, and I was a few feet, maybe 5 or 6 feet from this thing when I took this picture. And you can see that most of the front area is in really good definition. Now, if we zoom in, let that render. There we go. So you can see that wide open, this handle is sharp, but it falls off real quick to the door. And then at f22, the handle is sharp and the entire door is sharp as well. And we get up in here and you can see the difference, how quickly it falls off. And if I can get to, there we go, that stove, or that sort of chimney nub there, you can really see the difference there. I think that's probably the most dramatic. And then, of course, you can see the background. And that's the advantage, right, of shooting wide open with a 105 is you get that really nice bokeh. And I've got better examples of that. Let's look at these two, and then I'll show you what I think is like the nice happy medium. So here's a wide open, true wide open, because I was far enough back to get this, 2.8 on the left and f22 on the right. So wide open and stop down basically all the way in comparison. And you can see even at this, just looking at the full picture. And these are raw files. They are untouched and unedited, straight out of the camera. So you can see how you fall off. But if you look at the, I was focused somewhere in here, like right at the edge of this hub where these bolts are. So you can get an idea at 2.8 how quickly it falls off from maybe 6 feet away is about where I was. And then when you get out to the hub, you can even see that it's starting, you're losing detail right here. You don't have the sharpness there, but you do at f22, of course. And then out here, this is really where you see it. But everything else, the contrast, the exposures, the light, the all the detail, with the exception of focus, is very, very same. So I like that. You can see up here in this corner, it looks like there's maybe just about the same amount of noise. This was shot at ISO 400, so there shouldn't be much noise being introduced there. But you can see maybe there's just a hint of noise up in this corner in both. And then this is the one that I think is, this is kind of the happy medium. So I shot this at f11. And if you've got good lighting, and this was in the afternoon on a sunny day, but it was in the woods, so there's a lot of dappled light. There's a lot of trees that are casting a lot of shadow. So it's not bright sunlight. And I was able to shoot at f11 and still fast at 1/320th. And I think this is a nice compromise. If you want your whole image to be respectably sharp, but you want to be able to still, have your single point of sharpness there. We'll have to let that render a sec. There we go. All right, so here's another kind of a fun comparison to look at. And on the left, I'm wide open as I could be at that distance at 3.5. And then I'm at f16 on the right. And you can see that this is about the distance, the depth of this photograph is probably 1 inch from down at the bottom here to the top. Probably goes a distance of 1 inch away from the lens. And at f16, it pretty much renders all of that tack sharp. And there you can really see the difference in what you get when you stop down. Impressive lens. It really does a nice job. And of course, a 105, you think 105 and you think portrait. Just a spontaneous and kind of an impromptu portrait of my dog laying in the grass. And this is wide open at 2.8. And what a beautiful portrait lens the 105 is. And if we want to zoom in here, you can see you're not giving up anything there. That is just about as tack sharp can be. So 105 is not just a macro lens in this case. It is a fantastic portrait lens, especially when you open that thing up. Just let that background melt away. All right. And a couple more examples like that. Here's, I talked about bokeh earlier. All right, so this is just a photo of one of my video cameras. And you can see that the background just melts completely away. You can notice that there are objects back there, but they're really not definable at all. And they're only several feet away. It really does a nice job. You can even see wide open here that even that little monitor, the little flip out monitor, is closer to the lens enough that it's out of focus. So you're still dealing with a very, very narrow focus band at this distance at 2.8. But it's just a beautiful separation between the background and the subject. And this is another good example I like. This is a Zoom F6 field recorder, and it just obliterates the background. And this is at f3. Just obliterates that background. Let that render a second. There we go. But where it's sharp, it is very, very sharp. And it's just a nice consistency. So this is close to macro distance, but not full. So I was probably had the lens 6 or 8 inches away from this flower. So it's not as close as you could get to focus. And I also shot this at f8 because I did want to try and get quite a bit of detail. I didn't want to have to do anything like focus stacking, which you really is hard to do when you're doing outdoor photography, because if there's any breeze at all, even movement you can't see, it's going to be really difficult to process the focus stacking. But what I like is when you zoom in on this, let that render a minute. There we go. You can just see the detail, like every little grain of pollen. Really sharp there. Contrast is fantastic. Whites are rendered beautifully. It really is a sweet lens. Yeah, just a couple more here. So again, you can see that the background can just be completely obliterated. Would have been nice if he turned around and gave us a big smile, but if you ever wonder what a daddy long legs butt looks like, there you go. All right, so there's just a look at some of the output from my testing and playing with this. I was going to show these bricks, but then it dawned on me that I really couldn't guarantee. I'll just pick one and open it. But I couldn't guarantee that that I was perfectly parallel to the bricks. And then I realized that if I tried to show corner to corner or edge to edge sharpness, I may not be doing a fair demonstration, because if my lens wasn't perfectly parallel to that wall, then that's not fair. So I'm not going to show that in any close-up detail. So like most of Nikon's new Z-mount lenses, this one has a customizable control ring. The control ring can be used to change aperture or ISO setting or even exposure compensation. There's also a focus limiter, something that's very important for macro work. Like the other Z-mount lenses, it has a fluorine-coated lens that really does help keep the lens clean, helps keep that dirt, water, and other icky stuff from sticking to it. It may look big, but about this much of it is hood. It's super lightweight. And it is a true macro lens, which means 1:1 ratio magnification. But it's also a fantastic portrait lens and a general medium-length bread-and-butter lens. It costs just a hair under $1,000 at most of the big sellers, which is not cheap for the non-pro. It's something you got to think about, but it is a great value. This lens is very easy to use, easy to carry all day long, and produce fantastic results. It gets a huge thumbs up from me. This channel is brand new, so if you didn't hate the video, please hit the like button and leave a comment. That really is going to help the channel get started. I'd also love it if you'd subscribe so that there will be more people and fewer crickets watching the next video. Thanks and have a great day.